Hi everybody, after some technical difficulties, we can finally begin. Welcome to the Juicy Wedge, the musical podcast with me, Damon, Joel and Matt. Today's topic of choice is the Beatles and their rightful successors. I'd like to start off by introducing myself and my music taste. Into everything from disco, blues, all the way to folk, and some pop music today. Taylor Swift's new album is one that I've been listening to regularly. Over to you, Joel.
Hello. I've been listening to edgy music and classic music, such as Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and Pink Floyd.
Classic.
Pink Floyd are the
I
best
thought you
band.
listened, like, I've been listening to Tchaikovsky. No, it's Led Zeppelin.
Pink Floyd are the best band in the entire world. If you say otherwise, you are wrong. Thank you.
Okay, so cheers for that, Joel. So I'm Matt. I love all music, as long as it's not popular. I like every single genre. I'll listen to J. Cole all the way over to like Hocus Pocus. Bon Iver obviously is very topical right now. Ooh, love a bit of Bon Iver. But yeah, I enjoy pretty much anything. Back over to you, Damon.
Today's topic, as I said briefly, was the Beatles and the successors. So we're going to be talking about who we think the Beatles' successors should be, rightfully. I believe the three of us have done a bit of research, picked a few songs that can go in our chosen ones playlist. At the end of the podcast, we'll decide that just for our news. And we've each picked someone from different eras. So over to you, Matt, to start.
Yeah, so I'm going to be picking, I believe, unless Joel's gone really off the rails here. I picked the earliest band that they're actually still active to this day. So as we said earlier about the Beatles, it's and choosing their heir apparent. It's about not only the music that they created, but also their connection to the band itself. That is one of the parameters that I think is incredibly important, which is why I have chosen ELO, aka Jeff Lynne's ELO, the Electric Light Orchestra. Huge fan of the band. I went to a lot of their gigs when I was younger, and I remember like there was one amazing experience where it was the band used to travel without Jeff Lynne because Jeff Lynne said that they weren't legitimate because without him it wasn't the Electric Light Orchestra. So he just showed up at this gig one day in the middle of Truro, just showed up and played with the band because the lead guitarist for the band his nan had died or something, so I had to go to the funeral. So I got to have the full remaining Electric Light Orchestra experience, and it was just absolutely amazing.
Oh, I bet that was insane.
And made me fall in love with them, and as I said, I was brought up on them. So yeah, I that's the name that I'm putting into the ring, ELO. What about you, Joe? Or Damon?
I'll go next. So mine is Oasis. I know that might be slightly left of field for some people, but Paul McCartney has been quoted speaking about them. They are self-proclaimed bigger than the Beatles, as Liam Gallagher said in '96. That might have been one of the nails in the coffin, but throughout the Oasis back catalogue, there is several influences from lyrics and chord progressions, and so the outro for She's Electric is very alike from the outro from A Little Help from My Friends by the Beatles themselves. Extremely alike. It's it's almost like you're listening to the outro for both songs. Oasis also like to take bits from the Beatles, so they use massive orchestras when creating their songs, something the Beatles are very synonymous with. The Oasis, like the Beatles, are a huge commercial success. Maybe not these days, like the Beatles are, but in the 90s and the early 2000s, they're one of the biggest bands about for wall of sound rock. You know, that poppy kind of rock that gets very high up in the charts. Oh, we seem to have lost Matt,
He's back.
and he's back
Sorry,
again.
my
So yeah, and both Noel and Liam have both been quoted saying that they've lifted stuff from the Beatles catalogue. You know, the lyrics, inspired lyrics, start a revolution from my bed, because John Lennon and Yoko both sat in their bed to protest the war in Vietnam. You know, stuff like that throughout the Oasis catalogue. You know, you could say they're a successor. You could say they're a wannabe. You know, the way they dress with the round glasses and their hair. You could say they're styling themselves on the Beatles whilst doing the whole Britpop scene at the same time. So yeah,
I'm gonna go with wannabe.
Yeah. You know, in Supersonic they say, "Can you sail with me in my yellow submarine?" You know, stuff like that is throughout their catalogue that can really put them up there. With, alone being one of the biggest bands in British history.
You can tell
And-
I've done the most research.
Over to you, Joel.
Well, I'm going to go for a controversial because obviously we've had the 60s and 70s.
Can
in
I
ELO.
interject?
You can. If you don't freeze.
Oh,
If you
Matt's
please.
having some technical difficulties again.
I'll give him 5
Uh.
seconds to interject.
Obviously, this being the first podcast, we will get through these teething problems. Hello,
Sorry,
Matt.
What was your
my-
interjection?
my interjection was just that Damon and I have discussed we've discussed our choices. Joel hasn't told us his, so we
Oh.
don't know anything about that.
Mine's controversial. So, obviously, we've got ELO in the 70s and 80s, and then we've got Damon in the 90s. I decided to go for something modern with Tame Impala
Ooh,
because
all right. I
like
love right.
their first 2 albums were very psych-based, and it's a very interesting conversation. And like Oasis, there is comparisons with Tame Impala, with people such as Sean Lennon, John Lennon's son, actually saying he sounds very much like his dad. So there we go.
Okay. So I want to start off by talking about the connections, because that's something that's been quite heavily
Yeah.
featured in our conversation so far. I just want to say that Jeff Lynne, like, there is literally a Wikipedia page based on his attachment to the Beatles.
Find this. Where's this thing?
You know, obviously, Jeff Lynne, like a well-known fact, he was in the Travelling Wilburys alongside George Harrison. That's
Yeah. Very
that's
much
a
so.
fact. He also, if I
He's gone again.
Oh, teething problems for the first one. Always the way. Well, I'll carry on from what Matt's saying. ELO, if I'm right in thinking that he played with some of the Beatles, he was
Yeah,
good friends with them also.
yeah, like he did. Obviously, George Harrison's farewell, or like, what was it? George Harrison's
Was it like concert for George?
yeah, like memorial gig, didn't he?
Yeah, with Clapton
Yeah.
and
Gently
Julian
Weeping.
Lennon.
Yeah, but thanks for making my argument for me. Really sorry about this. My internet has been doing fine up until now. Like, there were literally no issues, and as soon as we started streaming, it's
Always the way.
decided that it hates me. Only on my phone. But yeah, my argument has probably been made for me by both Joel and Damon, as they both know the connections of it. But that George Harrison produced some stuff for ELO, and Jeff Lynne did it vice versa. there's such an integral connection between those two bands. I believe that it was George Harrison and possibly Paul McCartney that said that that the ELO were their natural successor. That was sort of the progression of the music. The evolution of the Beatles' music was getting more and more experimental, bringing in, a bit more orchestra, a bit more stuff going on, and that's exactly what ELO did. They continued the narrative-based music. The songs were very much narrative-based, and they just adapted it into their own style. They developed it. And,
Well, yeah. When you take tracks like "Mr. Blue Sky," for example, that wouldn't be out of place on a Beatles record, would it? You know.
Yeah.
Maybe
John Lennon even said that ELO were the sons of the Beatles. Which is,
when you think about it like that, ELO are the natural successors.
Yep, there we go. Podcast done. We'll see you next week.
So when you look at Tame Impala, for example, their second album, especially, I had a little listen of Tame Impala because they were on my list of things of choices. Their second album, especially, is extremely, that Indian psych, the late '60s, this, it's very, LSD heavy, that sort of very heavy psych. It was that album wouldn't be out of place in a Beatles back catalogue either.
Like Lonerism, their second album, is like a revival of that natural high from music.
Well, yeah. When you're listening to Psych, you can't help but think of Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Their second album is extremely psych heavy. Taking on those harmonies by the Beatles and putting the psych twist on them with a sitar and really beautiful wall of sound.
Yeah.
Interesting thing. Have you all got Spotify up?
Yes.
Right. I can get it up.
Oh, can you now?
Oh.
Hey, this is PG.
No, it's 13 plus. If we go to Lonerism, the album on Spotify by Tame Impala.
Yep.
Go to 45 seconds in to the first song, Be Above It.
It's kind of difficult to do that when my computer's being a pain in the backside. But describe it to me, I'll imagine.
Yeah, I've got it on.
Right, you play it? Have a listen to that.
Ooh.
And tell me that does not sound like John Lennon.
It doesn't sound like John Lennon. I can't hear
it. But that whole first song has kind of Magical Mystery Tours. That whole album has Magical Mystery Tour vibes to it. That kind of weird but satisfying sound.
Well, I can tell you, just listening to the first 30 seconds roundabout, that the drum sound is very Ringo-esque. You know what I mean? He's got a very particular way of drumming, and that comes
He just
through.
slips into the groove. That's just, the whole thing with Ringo was he always managed to find the beat for a song. It wasn't just, a rhythm.
Well, actually, you say that on the 2008 Oasis record, Ringo Starr's son plays the drums for them, and it sounds like Ringo is playing on that record. Some of the drum fills, you think, hang on a minute, am I listening to a Ringo record? But you're not. It's his son, which is it's pretty crazy how that moves on down through family members.
Yeah,
it's quite interesting because obviously Tame Impala sounds exactly like the Beatles. It sounds like they're sampling the Beatles with enhanced music production.
Well, it sounds like a modern take on the Beatles.
Yeah, it sounds like what the Beatles would be if they had modern music production and the vast library of stuff you can get online these days, just at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, if we're straight up throwing out songs now, have a listen to Summer and Lightning. Just listen to the first, like even the first second of that, just sounds exactly like any Beatles song. Just pull that up and have a little listen.
Oh
Because
yeah.
to me, that's just like literally that could just be the Beatles.
Yeah, it sounds like the Beatles if they were in the 80s and had synths.
Yeah. Which is basically
it
just what
sounds like
ELO is.
It sounds like a George Harrison record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 80s Harrison.
What?
That Harrison
I'm
record.
pretty sure that he was involved in the producing of the song.
It sounds awfully like the sort of the guitar you can hear on it. It's very Harrison-esque.
Yeah. It's
It is extremely. My mind's set on you. That as soon as I heard that guitar, that's the song I thought of straight away.
Yeah, that's the thing about Harrison, that technically he's not or wasn't the best guitarist ever, which is from Guitar Gently Weeps that they had to get Clapton in.
Yeah, Eric Clapton. Yeah.
But rhythm-wise and just the groove, which the Beatles is just the groove, which makes it so good. With just his rhythm guitar just makes you forget about all technical stuff.
I forget what the John Lennon record is. He wrote about Paul McCartney. It was actually about himself. George Harrison's on that. With that Harrison, it would not sound the same record.
Yeah.
If you had a Clapton on it, for example, I forget what it's called. I was listening to it last night. I know Yoko's on it somewhere,
obviously.
Screaming
with her tambourine.
But I think the only one we got left to talk about is McCartney, and he's here, there, and everywhere.
I would like to say something that I like. This is one of my dad's greatest quotes I've ever heard. Is that
a Bob quote?
What if John Lennon was in the Rolling Stones? Because I don't know why, but like me and Bob, especially from Bob, my dad, that John Lennon was the best Beatle, and Paul McCartney is just. Hold on. That Paul McCartney's just. I don't know why. We just always think Paul McCartney's a bit of a knob. I don't know why, but he's not. He's a musical.
He's a musical genius. But John Lennon, I've seen him play with the Rolling Stones. He did, and he fitted in he had that more. He's more of a rock, really a rocky kind of vibe.
Whereas Paul McCartney slips more into that pop.
That pop, the Monkees. That's what comes to mind straight away.
You look.
Yeah, I would have to say that George Harrison is the best Beatle.
Without doubt.
I love George Harrison. The fact that he funded the Monty Python movie, what was it, Life of Brian, just because he wanted to watch it is like.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Harrison was the one that had the most kind of morals as well, to a sense. Like he wasn't involved in much of the drama and things like that.
He wasn't the bitchy one.
Yeah, he just played his guitar and went home, kind of thing.
Yeah, you can see that in interviews. He sits there quietly and doesn't, the occasional sarcastic quip, and then he comes back again.
He sits there quietly.
Hello.
But yeah. Well, what time are we on? We're about 25 minutes in now, aren't we?
27 minutes.
Yeah, and we haven't even really spoken about our choices. So why do you think Oasis, other than Ringo Starr's son?
So I think Oasis purely because, from an influence point of view, when you listen to Oasis music, certain tracks especially, you think the Beatles. They're a huge pop success. They're not just a success in England; they're a success around the world.
Yeah, they're a commercial success like the Beatles.
They're extremely good commercial success. They got a few platinum selling albums. You know, they fell off a bandwagon a little bit, but still, like the Beatles, individually, they're still extremely popular. The Gallagher brothers, extremely popular. You know,
You
They
go
I
can
don't
to
slot-
like them.
you go to any nightclub and stick on Wonderwall or Don't Look Back in Anger,
you
people
know,
can yell that out.
it's a. I'd say it's a modern, not, a '90s Beatles.
I would say that they are equivalent to the Beatles
Yeah,
in the 90s. However, I don't think that that's necessarily enough to make them the heir
It's
apparent,
acceptable.
because
yeah,
they didn't have the same creative drive as
I think they
ELO or even like Tame Impala are really pushing
Yeah,
what is pop, what can still be popular whilst
yeah. I think
being
that's
creative.
what. After I did all my research, I sat back and I listened to their catalog, most of their albums, and I did come across that they're quite like. Whereas the Beatles, you get to like Rubber Soul, and then the sound changes
yeah,
completely.
they change.
You know,
Mm.
whereas Oasis, they start with Britpop and they finish with 2000s Britpop. Sounds the same.
And then
You know,
20 years later, they're still holding on to that Britpop.
they're still holding on to these one or two songs from their first two albums.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
I reckon they just copied and pasted the Beatles. That they didn't push anything further.
well, that's kind of the way I'm looking at it from. Successful or wannabe, because like
Yeah.
they said they've even owned up and said they used the chord progression from My Guitar Gently Weeps on She's Electric,
Mm.
and they stole the chord progression from Imagine, for Don't Look Back in Anger.
Yeah, because if you look at it, if they copy and paste that, they're bringing people's feelings and nostalgia of those records into
Yeah,
their song.
exactly. The way I'm looking at it wasn't from the successor branch, but also from how they were influenced by the Beatles.
Hmm.
We got to remember that it was the 90s and not the 60s. So, it wasn't, we didn't have we're booming in this country,
Yeah,
financially.
they revived this kind of vibe of the 60s in a 90s fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because obviously in the 90s you had that huge drug influence.
Drug culture. Yeah,
Drug
it was a huge drug culture.
Like in the electronic scene and the whole rave scene and illegal rave scene in the 90s was just insane.
And also, like the Beatles, they only lasted for about 10 years. So,
Yeah.
well, not even that. Their first record came out in 94. Their last half decent record came out in 99, 2000. So,
I find it
they
quite interesting that obviously the Beatles and Oasis only lasted for 6 to 10 years. Whereas you've got Ed Sheeran, which has been around for like 10 years. And you think of the music that the Beatles produced in those 10 years, it's just insane.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Even in like the last 5 years of their stuff.
Well, exactly. This,
I think that the argument needs to be distinguished between, as Damon said earlier, like successor / heir apparent, and also like imitator, like the similarity of their journeys, and I think that the whole heir apparent argument, for me personally, holds more weight, because
without doubt, I completely agree.
So I think we can discount Oasis from the argument. I think we've eliminated Oasis.
Yeah, the whole idea of me picking Oasis was just to give us a left field,
Yeah.
They counted themselves out the argument when they said they were going to be bigger than the Beatles.
Yeah.
And even Paul McCartney himself said, you're not now, purely because
Because you said that.
of that, because
Yeah.
you've got this arrogance.
Yeah.
I know the Beatles had a sense of arrogance, but it wasn't like that. Not
I
that,
think-
Yeah.
or we're the best.
Oasis had more of a arrogance and kind of vibe to them. They were more about the pop culture and less about the actual music.
Yeah, it was like,
Yeah.
I'm a rock and roll star.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And the fact Liam
But-
Gallagher's like, I had little people making my tea and everything. This like shows what perspective he had on it. He's not like, oh, I was in the studio making this stuff. He talks about the stories of being a rock star, basically.
You know, on the drugs
a
and the
musician.
champagne and that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with Tame Impala, like I haven't listened to an incredible amount of their stuff. I've
Mm.
listened to, some of the ones like what's the one that's like Don't You Know Better or something. That's
Yeah,
the less to
that's
know,
what-
the less you know, the better.
yeah.
That's like the most popular one.
Yeah.
Like even in that one, there's you can, and with most modern music, you can feel the influence. With most pop music, you can feel the influence of it. But with Tame Impala, it's very much traveling the same journey, feeling the influence, hearing the similar sound and the creative journey. Like it's all sort of there, and it's also
Yeah.
I feel all there for ELO, but with the additional connection
Yeah.
of
You can
I think that's a
definitely,
strong point.
You can see Tame Impala's evolution as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. Well, look
From,
at
like,
the
psych-
look.
They've kind of gone the opposite way of the Beatles. They've gone from
Very
psych
much
to
so.
pop instead of pop to psych.
Well,
Yeah.
you look at the music he's been making with Mike Skinner of the Streets.
Mm.
You know, that track they put out on his mixtape, very good record, may I add, if you like pop music. But to draw them all in together, well, you could say Tame Impala would be a modern reincarnation of the Beatles.
Mm.
From their musical perspective, the way they're, as you say, the journey of the music, the way it's made, not just chucked up, you know, like
Yeah.
very much so. So, are we agreed that? I think we're probably all agreed that ELO is the natural successor, and
Yeah.
Tame Impala is a modern reincarnation,
Yep, I'd agree with that.
and
I'd agree with
Oasis,
that, 'cause that's my opinion.
Oasis is still not better than Blur.
That was always that as well. No, Damon,
I
Stone
would-
Roses are better than them all.
I'd just like to chuck in another name, sort of not into the hat. I don't think that they're quite as I don't think they're quite there. However,
Mm.
I think they had the ability to. They're a band called Badfinger.
Yeah.
Badfinger were basically a band that sort of rose up, and they started in 1961 as the Ivies. They developed along into Badfinger, and they produced a song called Baby Blue, which was covered by who was it by again? Baby Blue was then sung by
Am I right in thinking they're the one
Top
that
of
was
my head.
signed to the Beatles Apple label?
Yes, yeah, they were indeed.
I like their
Um,
haircuts.
if you listen to their song "Come and Get It," just have a listen to that, or "Day After Day," which was actually produced by George Harrison again.
Yeah, I was
"Come
gonna
and Get
say-
It" was written and produced by Paul McCartney.
I was going to say that one was Paul McCartney.
They were signed to the Beatles Apple label.
Yeah.
Their band was named after the Beatles because
Well, the
John
Beatles
Lennon
actually
had a
wrote-
bad
the
finger
Be-
whilst he wrote "With a Little Help from My Friends."
The Beatles actually covered it. Can we get it
Mm.
as well on
That-
the Abbey Road album?
You can just "Without You" was the one that was covered by Harry Nilsson. Sorry, but you can listen to pretty much any one of their songs, and you would be able to mistake it for a Beatles song. You know, they were fuck. They were
They were fucked.
They-
Good.
they were fucked. They were a really, really
That-
fantastic
Badfinger's,
band that had so much promise.
Yeah, they had so much promise, but if I remember rightly, didn't two of them die in the late 60s.
Suicide. They committed suicide in
Yeah.
the 70s because their producer screwed them over. An
And that
absolute
was,
tragedy.
wasn't that the turmoil with the Apple label? If I
It was
remember
actually their
rightly.
producer, I believe. If I'm correct, their producer screwed them out of all of their money from the Without You, Come and Get It, and Day After Day. Day After Day, by the way, is my favourite. If you want to have a listen to one of them, listen to that one. And yeah, their producer screwed them out of the money from that, took all of the rights, and then when they tried to fight it back, it turned out they couldn't, and one of them killed themselves. Ham killed himself, and because he'd recently bought a £30,000 house, and his girlfriend was expecting a child, and they didn't have the money. So then
You find
Evans.
that a lot with the late 60s and early 70s.
Yeah.
The music production and the whole music business kind of screwed a lot of people over because they didn't know the legal side of it. They just came in as young people. Like if you look at Sid Barrett, like a lot of them just couldn't cope with the whole
The fame.
rock star.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the
Exactly.
machine that is the music industry.
Right. Okay. So I think that we'll knock call that the end of the topic and move on to our next part of the
Sounds
podcast. So next part of the podcast. Carry on.
One sec. We've just got a comment here in the chat saying from Matt Meatyard saying you're wrong, I'm right. Just wanted to address that.
Really, Matt? I don't know that guy. Who is he?
I thank you for your comment, Matt. I just want to agree with you wholeheartedly. And yeah, sorry, continue.
Well done.
So, analysis, we have determined that ELO are the predecessor, aren't they? Or the
predecessor. They came before.
the successor.
So, now we move on to the next part of our podcast, The Chosen Ones, which is a part of the podcast where we bring songs or two songs from what we're talking about at the topic, and we all decide on two songs, one by the original artist and one by the successor or the modern reincarnation or Oasis. Yeah, anybody we're talking about. So one by the Beatles and one by anybody we're talking about to go into our Chosen Ones podcast playlist, which you can find on Spotify, which will be going live after the end of this podcast. You can listen along.
Or I can change the scene, Damon. Oh no, I can't because I didn't set up the cameras on the other scene. Don't worry about
that. So I'll start with chucking my one in there. By the Beatles, I think Nowhere Man, because from Rubber Soul, because of the harmonisation, and two, they've only played it once or twice live because it was so difficult to play live. I think it's one of the best tracks, personally speaking. And yeah, and my other one is Go Let It Out by Oasis because it sounds exactly like the Beatles because it's got the Mellotron on it throughout the whole thing. If you haven't listened to it, you'll understand what I'm saying. It's literally centered around the Mellotron.
What was your Beatles song?
Nowhere Man.
Nowhere Man. Okay. I think I'm gonna listen to that. What's that on Rubber Soul?
Yeah. Very, very, very. It's quite a synonymous track. If I remember rightly, isn't it on the Yellow Submarine?
It might be.
Brilliant film, may I add.
Is it really?
Yeah, it for the day and age, it's fantastic. What are you on about? It still stands up to today's animations.
It's not quite Thomas the Tank, though, is it?
No, it's not. But it's a brilliant film. I grew up watching Yellow Submarine.
Fun fact: I found out something the other day that Ringo Starr only did one episode of Thomas the Tank.
I thought Ringo Starr was the narrator for the whole thing. So my childhood's been a lie.
We've been lied to about Ringo being Thomas.
I thought Ringo Starr was the baby in Teletubbies. that would be absolutely amazing. Just Ringo Starr just rising and crying.
So Matt, what's your What are your chosen songs?
So my chosen songs, um, for ELO, I've already mentioned Summer and Lightning. It's not that. I'm gonna go with Turn to Stone. It's an absolute
Oh,
banger of a song.
And what's your Beatles?
For my Beatles song, I'm gonna go with She's Leaving Home because again, it
She's
is
Leaving
just
Home.
an absolute
That's a
banger.
You guys are so edgy. Don't go for the ones that are popular.
What? She's Leaving Home is really popular.
I think Bob Dylan covered it, possibly.
Mm. Bob Dylan's covered everything. Any song you've ever heard, Bob Dylan has already covered it.
Or written it.
Or
Yeah, or written.
Or has he got
And
like
I think he
75
covered it and
albums?
then wrote it.
if you look at any song by Dua Lipa, it's actually written by Bob Dylan.
Right, Joel, your turn.
I, for my Beatles song, I'm going for Strawberry Fields. Just because it's a vibe and that song is just.
I think the only thing that sells it for me for that song is one, the drum, and two, the mellotron. Other than that, I think it's a bit of a subpar song.
Wow, Damon.
Well, it is.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
For this, this is the first time obviously doing this stream. I was just wondering, should we do a song discovery of the week to throw into the playlist as well? I think that might
Yeah.
be quite interesting.
Yeah,
In brackets,
that's a good.
my logo. Yeah, I knew you were going to say.
So, Joel, what's your Tame Impala song?
Oh, sorry.
Why is it going to be Tame Impala? Oh, yeah, it's going to be Tame Impala. Let me have a look because I haven't actually.
The less I know, the better.
Just shout out the most popular song. All three of our followers are going to be loving it. Like Tame Impala
Joel,
are going to come to us.
What are we looking like for watchers?
We currently got 3.
Hi, 3 watchers. One of them's probably my gran.
It's me.
One is Matt, and then another is somebody else we don't know. Ooh.
Oh,
It actually
mystery
might be
viewer.
Me? I don't know.
Hi, Mark.
I don't know. I'm gonna go Champagne Supernova by the Oasis. By the Beatles. By Oasis.
What? That's Oasis. You're supposed to do one from your own band.
I couldn't say about anyone we've discussed.
Yeah.
I think that's rubbish. I think that's bull.
Right, either way, the ELO one's getting in because it's the best song.
Obviously, yeah, Turn to Stone is the best song out.
Turn to Stone, yeah. So
basically, we've determined that Matt has just won this whole podcast.
Yeah, I've won. Victory is mine.
I put up a fight.
So, right, let me go to the playlist.
While Joel's doing that, we will talk about some news, I think. So, the news section of our podcast is going to be about music production, live music around where we are and in the UK and the world in general, really. So, obviously, we're under pandemic coronavirus bollocks at the minute, still with restrictions still being lifted slowly. So, live venues, indoor venues can open, but they're opening at restricted things. You know, you got to wear your face mask, a very limited number of seats, 25% capacity max, I believe. What are your thoughts on that? Because obviously it's affecting the bands.
Yeah.
You know, ticket sales are right down. Billy Bragg, for example, selling off his memorabilia because he's not got any live gigs this year.
I think it's good. Obviously, the separated seating and everything for big acts like people like Sam Fender and people that can sell out arenas and things.
The problem is they're not allowed to get up.
No, people that can sell out arenas it's good for, but obviously people that rely on independent venues like the Old Bakery and there's multiple in like Plymouth and everything, all these
The Junction
and the Watering Hole and all those lot.
Yeah.
Even like O2 venues. Like,
well, Scoria House just down the road. The Libertines had to be cancelled. That was meant to be this weekend coming. I had tickets for that, and it's been rescheduled for next year, unfortunately. But I agree with you. What I have noticed is that some artists are doing a live stream that you have to pay to pay-per-view live stream of their gig, which is an awesome idea, I think. You know, Ride, for example, did it. I think Frank Turner did it.
Yeah, Frank Turner and Biffy Clyro did it as well.
Biffy Clyro did it when they got their number one
Yeah.
in the album chart or
It's a good
single
way
chart.
for smaller bands as well.
Oh yeah.
very
Don't necessarily get the money because obviously big bands and big artists get tons of money from listens on Spotify, but smaller artists aren't getting that same revenue.
Well, exactly, and hopefully this coronavirus goes away soon, so like we can have our Glastonburys and our tea festivals and even our small festivals down here in Cornwall. We got Tunes in the Dunes and Ballmasters Festival.
Ballmasters is one of the biggest festivals.
Live at Scoria House. That was a new one that was meant to be started this year. A new rock festival. Real local stuff. What you got to remember is these local places are missing out on your money. So support your local local places, really, especially independent ones, because they don't get the backing from the big record labels and stuff like that. They don't have hundreds of £1,000s to plow into bits and bobs.
Yeah, places like O2 and things, they kind of sort of have a buffer, but again, they're still being affected. But it's mainly
exactly.
independent companies and businesses that are being affected by it.
Yeah, but the O2 Arena is not going to shut down.
No,
whereas
not the
your
O2
local
Arena, like O2 Islington and things like that. The little small.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah. They've got the little what are they called? What's that one in Brixton? There's one in Brixton. I know. Yeah. And places like that. But the good thing is, with Regards Records, because that's what we primarily deal in, is records. Honey Lemon Record Store, on eBay. Check us out. Facebook, Instagram. General chat about records.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Buy records on eBay.
Hashtag support local business. So, for example, Record Store Day, I think they're doing it over three days this year, or they've postponed it 3 times.
Yeah.
So it's meant to be in April. It's actually on Saturday. So go down, support your local record store. I cannot stress that enough.
Don't go to HMV.
Don't go to the big guys because they're expensive for one.
Yeah.
But the local guys, like we've got Music Nostalgia in Truro.
Brilliant place.
Been there donkeys. They do fantastic records. Their customer care is fantastic.
Yeah.
You will never know what you find unless you look in your local independent record store.
I see it. Why would you buy a record in HMV for 20 quid when you can get the original for 5 or 10 quid and get 2 of them?
Yeah, exactly. And then you build up a rapport with your local record label.
Yeah, and you can ask them, do you have this in stock and stuff? You can get a real relationship with them.
There's lots of special editions always released on a record store day.
Yeah.
There's a huge list, a humongous hundreds and hundreds of artists release special editions on Record Store Day. So this Saturday, go down, check them out. Even if you don't buy anything, it's all about the experience. Newton Faulkner's been in Truro a couple of times. A Record Store Day, artists do like to go mingle with the people.
Mingle with the people.
So to speak, because I know I'm going to be down there and I'm going to be looking for, you never know what you'll find.
Exactly. If you go down to Truro on Saturday, you can see Damon and say, "Hi, Damon, how are you doing?"
Oh, Damon, you're from the Juicy Wedge, a musical podcast. And we'll be like, "Oh, you were the third guy."
Damon probably
so that's the news. There's not really much other news about at the minute.
It's the same.
Music-wise, I think Amoeba, the massive record shop in America, one of the biggest in the world. I think it was the largest in the world. That's closed its doors for the final time, I believe, because of coronavirus. I think that wraps up the news.
Yep.
Kind of.
Well, I want to shout out. I want to shout out a new album that's come out this week. It's my logo. Um,
Oh, the pick of the
my
week.
logo. Pick of the week for me. Album wise, it's Milo Gore's new album. How do you grieve for the living whilst you're dead or something?
Wash your dead or
It
something.
it's absolutely amazing. I had to listen to the full shebang yesterday whilst I was at work. Absolutely amazing. Like just every single song, just it follows on the same vibe but has a different feel. Really beautiful songs. There's some old, there's some from like previous albums. There's some new, and I think there's a couple of covers in there as well.
It's good raw production.
Really amazing. Well, it's not really raw anymore. It's very very professionally done, very professionally mastered.
It still has that kind of approachable,
Indie.
Indie kind of production.
Oh yeah. I recommend the song "Homegrown" from there. Really really good. Like Damien, you should give him a check out. I think you quite.
Yeah, definitely will. I'll put it on my list.
Yeah, really enjoyable.
Joel, pick of the week for you?
A while ago.
Oh, same as Matt. Okay. My pick of the week is Roy Ayers' Ubiquity. If you're into your soul or your neo soul and your jazz fusion, then this one will be for you. Roy Ayers' Ubiquity. Everybody loves the sunshine. Absolute. It's been one of my albums for the summer and lockdown. It's definitely kept me a bit, on the straight and narrow. It's very raw. It's late 70s. It's it's soul music, so it's fantastic. The Third Eye is probably one of the best songs on the record. With the vibraphone, the vocals. It's everything you love. When you think 70s, this album is synonymous with that kind of like, that the soul kind of like jazzy scene.
I think that's definitely having a revival at the moment.
Yeah, very much. And yeah, I'd just say give it a listen, give it a try. If you think, oh, jazz, turn your nose up, there's different sorts of jazz. This album was one of them that really opened my eyes into the whole smooth jazz scene. Kind of really nice, smooth fusion jazz, Japanese jazz.
Let's have a chat about next week. Next week we've got an idea for what we want to do. It's pop influences throughout the ages, like
So
the evolution of pop, basically.
It's a continuation almost from this podcast, because definitely, the Beatles, you can't say pop in the same sentence without saying the Beatles.
They were the original pop masters.
So yeah, next week is pop influences. Quick plug at the end of the podcast. We have got merchandise coming out.
We do.
We do. You can start to pre-order. I think there might be a link somewhere.
No, there's not.
Not on this. Okay, if you head over to our Facebook page, there definitely will be a link. Honey Lemon Record Store. You can start pre-ordering your tote bags. Soon, we will be having other merch coming. The t-shirts, that sort of thing. They'll be reasonably priced. So yeah, that's the little plug. Leave your comments. I believe this is gonna be uploaded to YouTube at some point.
Yes, and other podcast providers.
This is going to be a regular thing. So we're going to be back probably in about a week's time.
Hopefully.
Next Wednesday, hopefully. We're going to be getting the teething problems out. Matt's going to fix his internet, and
We'll be here with another cup of tea.
Another cup of tea. So yeah, that was
what next week.
We're looking forward to reading your comments, and we will discuss them on next week's podcast. I think that wraps it up. So, speak to you next week.
Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers now. Cheers now.
Cheers.
Love you.
Cheers and gone. Cheers and gone. Bye.